Colonel Grossman, my old friend. How are you, sir?
Doing well, buddy. Been a truly blessed man, as you are. Good things happen in your world. Glad to see it.
Thank you. Thank you. We've known each other decades, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy. I remember you experimenting. Where were we? I think we're at Ken's house experimenting with electricity. I did not enjoy that prototype for the vest. Hey, let's. Everyone knows who you are. If they don't, then I can't help them. But we can help them together. What's your 2-minute Reader's Digest? Hey, I'm Mr. Grossman. This is what I do.
Yeah. Hey, prior service buck sergeant, paratrooper, Army Ranger, West Point psychology professor, author. Got a couple of books been real successful. On Killing.
Yep.
Came out in 1994, and it's 500,000 copies sold, 11 languages. On Combat is really even more important. That's what we're really touching lives with. That 16 years of war, On Killing and On Combat are both Marine Corps Commandant's required reading, Army and Air Force recommended reading. On Combat's issued in the DA Academy, issued in the Marshals Academy, Marine Corps Commandant's required reading, and recommended reading for other services. We got a couple other books out. Assassination Generation just came out a year ago about what's going on. And it's a good place for us to begin, Tony, and just how bad the situation is, how desperately we need our warriors, our sheepdogs, how we need to be prepared. And then the whole sheepdog model came originally from my stuff. And we got a couple of sheepdog kids books out there that are doing neat things.
Nice.
Been on the road now for 20 years. Retired from the Army 20 years ago last month. And more than 200 days a year for 20 years straight. And train every federal agency, train a lot of foreign nations, in Canada about once a month, having a lot of fun. I think I'm the only law enforcement trainer in America post-certified in all 50 states.
That's amazing.
Good ride, tearing all of our tier 1 spec ops, and all about the mental side of the game and the threat and the dynamics. Situation's bad, Tony. It's going to get a heck of a lot worse. It's worse than it looks. And that's kind of a good place for us to begin.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because, the whole mindset, mental side is, of course, near and dear to my heart, and an area I think where we first really connected back then. And it's. Let's just jump in because you said something that there are people online that talk about how statistically things aren't as bad. Yeah. And they go, things are actually better and blah, 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 blah. But let's hand the mic over to you. What's your take on it? Because I'm with you. Yeah. I think that this is a incredibly dangerous time in our world, a lot because of the psychology of this brazenness of this, just how, there's no more code anymore. You don't know whether it's a firefighter, getting shot at, cops getting ambushed, just the way people treat the malaise and disgust society has in general for our sheepdogs and our protectors. Yeah. But this is your area. You grab the mic and go for that.
Well, here's the bottom line, Tony, and all your listeners need to understand. The murder rate is being held down by medical technology. The docs are saving ever more lives every year. A wound that 9 out of 10 times would have killed you in World War II, on the modern battlefield, 9 out of 10 times you survive the same wound. And the same thing is true in our streets. And this is huge. I'm the visiting criminal justice speaker at universities. And I'm there, once a year they bring the big CJ criminal justice speaker. They gather all kinds of people. And I tell them, step one, the whole field of criminal justice, we assess the problem with murder. And that is a completely flawed data. A UMass Harvard study came out 20 years ago. It tells us if we had 1970s technology, the murder rate would be 4 times what it is. And that data is almost 2 decades old. The leaps and bounds of life-saving technology in the last couple of years are astounding. Every time they say, how many murdered in Chicago? How many murdered in Baltimore? How many murdered in Canada, England? It's a lie. It's a lie of omission. Because they're not telling you if we had 1970s technology, that number would be at least 4 times what it is. And so what I need to understand is year after year, a better assessment is the rate in which people are trying to kill each other off. But that's flawed because law enforcement can call it, other than murder, Every cop will tell you, make the crime data say whatever you want it to say. And the pressure will hold crime down. Ag assault becomes simple assault. Breaking becomes trespassing. It's like grade inflation. The definition of an ag assault has transformed. Nation after nation, the definition of serious assault, we'll make it say whatever you want it to be. And this is powerful tendency. But in America, year after year, not just the murder rate, but the number of people murdered has been coming down. And then in 2015, we had 1,700 more Americans murdered the year before, and the number should be coming down. 2016, if it had stayed the same, it would be bad. But this compound interest, 2016, 1,300 more Americans murdered the year before, and the number should be going down. That hyper-violent Latin American model, you know, you listeners out there, just Google 20 most homicidal nations on the planet, a snapshot of 2014 for the UN. The 7 most violent nations on the planet are all Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is new. Mexico has more loss of life than Iraq and Afghanistan put together. And Mexico don't even make the top 10. Mexico is number 14. Iraq is number 19. Afghanistan don't even make the top 20. I would rather take my family on vacation to Iraq than Mexico. The data is overwhelming. And this is new. There was a time, if you lived in El Paso, you popped down to Juarez. You know, you lived in San Diego, pop down to Tijuana, have a nice meal, do some shopping. Ain't nobody popping down to Juarez or Tijuana for a meal no more.
Right.
It is new. It is completely unglued. Everything south of the border is totally out of control at levels never seen before. It's coming our way like a freight train. The cops murdered in the line of duty. 2016 was the single worst year-over-year increase. Cops get better training, better body armor, better tactics, better technology. The only real assessment of the problem is cops murdered. Ignore the number of cops killed in the line of duty because they throw traffic accidents in there. Focus on cops murdered, and the numbers are horrendous. And they say, oh, the lowest number of cops killed in the line of duty since 1957. That's because the traffic accidents are down. Look at the number of cops murdered, and you get a totally different story. So, you know, we got 4 cops murdered in, 4 Mounties murdered in Mayerthorpe, 3 Mounties murdered in Moncton. The mass murder of law enforcement officers, the record in America was 4 dead, now 5 dead in Dallas, 4 dead in Baton Rouge in 2016. The single worst year-over-year increase in cops murdered. London, an increase of violence at unprecedented levels in just the last year. And of course, all of Europe is coming unglued. The dynamics, Interpol won't even print the crime data for these nations because the nation don't want anybody between nations. Interpol, 2003, stopped printing the crime data because the nation didn't want people to know. The crime data across Europe is classified. They won't tell you how bad it is because they want to pretend it's not bad. So baseline, right now, it's bad. It's going to get a hell of a lot worse. The FBI, the last couple of years, said it's, quote, the Ferguson effect. The FBI says we have created a sense of anger in our criminals. I call it a sense of righteous indignation in our criminals. I'm an old geezer, maybe a lot of touch. I always thought if you're a criminal, you live your life in fear. You're a criminal. You've broken the law.
Right.
You get to choose which laws you obey. And when you break the law, you're a criminal and you live your life in fear. Today, we've got this sense that the cops who are enforcing the law are the bad guys. And that is chaos and despair and coming unglued of our entire civilization around the planet. Of course, my book, Assassination Generation, has all this in it. It came out for Little Brown. The new ingredient, the sick movies and the sick video games are creating sick people. You and I know that under stress, we do what we're conditioned to do and what we're wired to do. The military, law enforcement, we know we have to train people to kill. Here's the key. You look at some horrible crime. Oh, that proves they're all killers. Nah, that's an outlier. You explain to me the 99% of our citizens for a lifetime never kill anybody and never try to. Think of that. Hundreds of millions of people bounce off each other every day. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents, and well over 99% for a lifetime never kill anybody and never try to. Explain that. Right. Inside most healthy people, there's this resistance against killing your own kind. The military and law enforcement know we have to train healthy people to kill. Pop-up targets, photorealistic simulators, and the video games are doing the exact same thing for kids. the whole medical community screaming from the mountainside across the planet. The sick movies, the sick video games, the sick TV shows are breeding sick kids. And here's the times that we're in, and we've got people that say, oh yeah, you know, the murder rate's down. The rate in which people are trying to kill each other has exploded in the last 2 years. Murder rate up like nothing we've ever seen before. Our Attorney General Sessions did a press release. Last 2 years straight, murder rates exploded like nothing we'd seen. Oh, it's nothing compared to the 1970s. You bastards! You lying media, you bastards! Comparing the number of people murdered, the murder rate between now and 1970 totally breaks down because of the leaps and bounds of medical technology. Tony, it's bad. All your listeners out there, I mean, circle the wagons, train yourself, arm yourself, be prepared. These are scary times, and the public is beginning to understand it. These are bad times, and we need what people like you have got to give, Tony.
What, in a nutshell, I mean, like there's some people that you know might listen to that and go, okay, like, you know, that's making me paranoid. How do we help people reconcile? It's almost like if you live if you have a beach house and you know big storms can hit you, and you know you need, it starts with this acceptance model, right? And now you're going to think about what's your, you know, evacuation route. How are you going to fortify the house? What are you going to do? And what advice do you have just for like somebody who's like tuning in? Because like all of my first responders listening to the show are going to be like, yes, exactly, we get it, Colonel. What about the general public, the citizen listening to this going, holy shit?
Yeah, well, here's what we know. I teach resiliency. I teach the bulletproof mind.
Right.
Resiliency is the medical term. I teach international and national psych conferences. Resiliency is a term for people who do not get PTSD. And the vast majority of our veterans do not get PTSD. They're stronger for the experience.
Right.
I was a keynote speaker at the first Department of Defense-wide resiliency conference, opening speaker at the second DoD-wide resiliency conference. I call it the bulletproof mind. And the first step in resiliency is understanding the magnitude of the problem and how very desperately we need that your sacrifice, your martial artist, your shooter, your sacrifice, hitting the range, hitting the dojo, hitting the gym, your sacrifice is for noble and worthy purpose. And you know, Plato talked about the guardian. We got the protected. We have the prey. We have the prey. We have the predator and the protector. I call that the sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog.
Right.
And people embrace that. You know, we love dogs. We're dog nation. We're dog civilization. And the idea is, you're not a wolf. Right? We don't want to be a wolf. If you're a wolf, our society will hunt you down. And you don't want to be a sheep. You don't want to be prey. Then you got to be a sheepdog. You got to be a protector.
Right.
And protectors hit the gym, and they hit the dojo, and they hit the range. They carry the life-saving tools that their nation will allow them to legally, lawfully carry. They seek the training. Embrace that sheepdog model. And be the protector from your family. I live in America. I am my family's secret service. Around the planet, unless you're wealthy or a politician, every nation on the planet, I guarantee you the politicians have armed security. The richest 1% in every nation has armed security. But the peons, the peasants, the citizens will never have that right. In America, I am my family's secret service. The president has the right to armed security, and so do you.
Right.
And that's the world I want to live in, where we're not unarmed peons. We're people who have the capability to protect ourselves. Canada is kind of a mixed bag. England, do what you can do. But all of you people out there, you sheepdogs, carry your gun off duty. Carry a backup gun. Wear your body armor. Take the steps forward along that path that you can take. You citizens out there, do what your nation will lawfully, legally allow you to do, and strive to create a nation of sheepdogs. You know, we got our Sheepdog Kids book. Just go to Amazon.com. Load in Sheepdogs, Grossman.
Right.
And it's sheepdogs. Meet our nation's warriors. Kids love it. Kids and it chokes people up. At the end is the original sheepdog essay from On Combat. But what we tell people is be that sheepdog and decide now whether you're predator or prey, whether you're protector or prey. We want to be the protectors, protect our family. Across North America, we teach run, hide, fight. Europe is teaching the kids run, hide, tell. What happened to fight?
Right.
The fight has been sucked out of them. A man gets up and kills a trained elder Frenchman. 3 Americans kick his ass. What's the lesson here? Right. They gave, God bless the French, they gave him the Legion of Valor. I mean, they gave him one of the highest awards France has to give. But why did it take 3 Americans to kick their ass? Europe has had the fight sucked out of them. We got to put it back in. We got to fight for it. Fight for our civilization. Fight for our families. Fight for a way of life. And believe in who you are as a sheepdog. Get the Sheepdog Kids book, step 1, and lay that foundation for that dynamic with our civilization and our kids. The second Sheepdog Kids book, by the way, is titled Why Mommy Carries a Gun. If mom or dad carries a gun, cops or federal agents or citizens, here's what we want the kids to know. Why mommy carries a gun. You find a gun, stop, don't touch, get an adult, the 4 universal gun safety laws. Here's what the Second Amendment, our heritage, famous sheepdogs throughout our history. We want to raise up a generation. And people read these books for children, and it chokes them up, and it has a tremendous impact. We can make a difference, don't we?
And you know where I stand on all this stuff, of course. So I'm just going to be devil's advocate to create interesting conversation, and maybe people driving, listening to this, or listening to this, after you've got 3 camps. You got Second Amendment people who get it, and even those people. I always make the joke that if you're carrying, if you're the target in an active killer situation or close quarter, like unless your gun is duct taped to your hands, you better know how to fight and weaponize your startle flinch. But then you've got the other camp of people who are anti firearm gun carry. And it was interesting is when you were talking about like armed security protecting our politicians, there's all the anti-gun politicians have armed security as well. So
somehow they're worthy of armed security, but you're not.
Right, exactly. And this ties into like the emotional argument that I always made is like, you need to be your own bodyguard. And it's not that accepting violence and studying violence doesn't attract violence. And that's like one of those ridiculous paradigms that a lot of people have. They go, well, I don't want to train because then I bring it into my life. And I go, no, I don't know if you saw this meme I created last year. Violence doesn't care what style you study. Violence doesn't care what political party you voted for. It just happens. And if you're prepared for it, you got a better chance of surviving it or returning fire. And I use fire as a metaphor because there's a lot of people I train who they live somewhere. I train in Europe. I train in UK. Only certain people get to have guns there. Bad guys and their armed response units. There's a way in that was that the railway cop. When he's fighting the guys with the machetes, right? Like. It's just being in the fight. I just actually interviewed Brian Murphy, and had a great, here's a guy, stayed in the fight, shot 15 times, didn't have his gun, stayed in the fight. And that's to me the biggest thing. And it's also some of the most important stuff that you do because you're talking at a massive audience where you're trying to inspire almost policy change, where what I'm doing is I'm more in the sands with people, but some of the biggest and most important stuff that you talk about is stress and fear and complex motor skill, and how if we increase the pressure, but we're not doing the scenario training, we're not doing the stress inoculation, that your complex motor skills can and will deteriorate in many cases. And I'm talking about 2 things at once, but I want to return this back to you. One is got the 3 camps. We got the people that go, yeah, I'm going to buy a gun, but they don't do the right training. Then we've got the people that go, I'm not going to have a gun. So they do 0 training. And then there's people sitting on the fence that are scared. They don't know which way to go. And now tie that into, so I'm going to throw you back the mic in a second, is all of them need to understand physiology, physics, and psychology and that relationship, because like that's everything. The mind navigates the body, and it doesn't matter which camp you're in because violence doesn't care which camp you're in.
Tony, there's two angles, a couple angles on that that are valuable. First off, I love to shoot. I grew up in the martial arts. I grew up in a shooting family. I turned 18, joined the Army. My martial art was a pistol and the rifle. And I'd heard for years about the martial art of the firearm.
Right.
Jiu-jitsu, a guy named Jeff Hall. He was a Vietnam Ranger right at the very end of the war, the most decorated Alaska state trooper, high-level martial artist, multiple styles, one of only about 30 grandmaster pistol shots on the planet. And he's resurrected the Japanese art of the firearm. Everything was an art, and gunpowder was an art. And then in the mid-1800s, we had repeating rifles. Whoa, time out, and they banned gunpowder. Well, he's resurrected that, and think of it as a martial art of the pistol. There's one caught at the black belt level, and it's got 3 weapons retention move built into it. It transitions from armed to unarmed fire. And Jiu-Jitsu, they don't care what your martial art is. When you want the shooting part of the package, they plug in. I think the spear system would be superb to start working in with this. For those, and again, the idea is that you can take Kung Fu, you can take the Chinese, the Japanese, kickboxing, whatever model that you want to. But when it's time to transition to a gun, here's what we've got. We got transition armed, unarmed fire. You're actually testing for your belt with your weapon skills.
Nice.
One article says 20 million Americans are in the martial arts. Only a few thousand compete. But the idea of competing against each other, people just, unless you're an Olympic level athlete, people aren't into that. But striving for the next belt, striving for the next standard. I thought it was good. I'm a gun sight grad, a front sight grad, military. I do a little competitive shooting. I showed up the first 3-day weekend and barely made brown belt. I got a range in my basement. I'm only home 1 or 2 nights a week, but I knew what shots I was hitting. I knew what I had to do. 2 years of work. I made my black belt. And so just tying that in, Tony, something I'd love you to see you doing. I'd love you to have have Jeff Hall on here sometime to talk about that.
Yeah, sounds fascinating.
Of the spear system. I tell almost every class that the instinctive response is a newborn baby has it. And I tell them, it's so powerful. Tony Blauer has a defensive tactic system that revolves around it. So first, understand that there's so many things we can weave into. But second, under stress, the simplest things become incredibly difficult. And I talk about knives. I made a partnership with Ernie Emerson on the Emerson sheepdog knife.
Nice.
Whatever folder you have has got to have a 90-degree guard that stops you from going on your blade. Well, I can't have a gun, but I can have a knife, and I carry a folder. I'm going to fight with the folder. Not if you don't have a guard that will stop you from going onto that blade. A Bowie knife, a samurai sword, a K-bar, they all have a guard. What we find out, people try to fight with that folder. They go right down that blade. Your hand gets sweaty, of course. Fine motor control breaks down, of course. Your hand gets bloody, of course it's going to get bloody. You slip down on that blade, you do yourself more harm than your opponent.
Right.
And so we've got the Emerson sheepdog knife. And then we got sheepdog&nbsp.com. It's my gun business. My son is a master gunsmith. We got about 9 patents. Nice. We got the trigger finger index point. The finger needs somewhere to go. The enhanced slide pulse. Sheepdog&nbsp.com. You can check out that. And the enhanced slide pulse, under stress, racking the weapon. If your hand's sweaty or bloody, if the weapon is oily or muddy or wet, racking the weapon becomes incredibly different. Look at the enhanced slide pulse, the trigger finger index point. The finger needs somewhere to go. You go from a known point to a known point. If there's a convulsive clutch, it's guided back. You talk about the software. Of the mental side. What about the hardware? Here's the sheepdog knife. Here's the sheepdog gun. With the hardware that integrates that so that these incredibly difficult things under stress become doable. I've been a fan of yours for 20 years. Over 20 years ago, we started working together, and you've influenced my thinking from the very beginning on how we got the software, the wetware, but we need the hardware, the enhanced slide pulls, the Emerson knife, the sheepdog knife. Well, we need the hardware to go with the software. And here we are, more than 20 years later, coming full cycle with each other, talking about the same thing. You've done mighty deeds in the meanwhile. Neat things are happening. There's great power in pulling all that stuff together.
I agree, and I love it. And it's the the it's interesting. You come back to, you know, I gave that example with you know, you're in a situation and you know, something happens and it just explodes in your face. At that moment, there's a startle flinch. We need to teach people to weaponize the flinch, and that's your first step of that protector mindset, is acceptance and acknowledge that there's a threat and there's a danger there.
Nobody else does that, Tony.
What's that?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's so simple. It's so basic, so powerful, and yet you know, nobody else does that.
Well, it's funny because I don't think you've heard a new metaphor that I've been playing with, is that your startle flinch is like an airbag in a modern car.
Oh, I love that. That is so cool.
Right. And so that airbag deploys and your fingers come up and your hands come up to protect your head. But then we need our cognitive brain to catch up to what our reptilian brain, the limbic system, the amygdala, is doing. It's bypassing cognition at that moment. It's faster than anything, right? And that's why we've got trauma and knife fights, trauma and gun fights to the hands, to the forearm, defensive wounds. Somebody goes through their windshield. They're not wearing a seatbelt. They're in an old car that doesn't have the airbag, and there's always trauma on the forearm. So what I've spent my life doing is trying to figure out how to weaponize the flinch. But what we're trying to get people to understand is that by acceptance and understanding the relationship between physiology, physics, psychology, you're getting your cognitive brain to accept and embrace what physiology is going to do. And now is when complex motor skill comes in. You've weaponized the flinch, the airbag's deployed, you've created a stable emotional, psychological platform. Now you can hit the bad guy, transition to your weapon. And this is where, in that extreme close quarter, high stress situation, and I love the idea of like the guard on the knife. And I gotta go to the website and check that stuff out. Because that's the issue. You see that stuff, you know, I've been in 3 knife confrontations in my life. The worst cut I ever had was playing with a folder. Not in the knife confrontation, you know, just like not paying attention and then going, oh shit. And like, you know, my hand's slipping up and opening my hand. And I don't say that to brag about the knife things. I just go like, why hasn't somebody put a guard on that before?
Well, see, and that's got the flipper too. You look at Emerson's sheepdog. It's got the flipper. Flipping, you know, just taking your thumb and pulling over the knife is fine motor control.
Right.
Just closing, that flipper is a gross motor skill.
Right.
And the flipper comes around and provides a guard. So, you know, just making a fist, you know, bringing that finger down, that's a gross motor skill. And in the process of flipping it, you hit that flipper comes around and provides a guard, the 90-degree guard.
Interesting.
So there are very few folders out there that do that sufficiently, that you're not going down on that blade. So, you know, the Emerson sheepdog knife and gun website, you know, it's good stuff, Tony.
I will definitely check it out. What else what do you say to somebody? And I know like you're so busy and you've got a captive audience, so you probably don't get asked this a lot, but what do you say to somebody that you actually care about, so you'll invest in them, who goes, I'm not going to carry a gun, I'm afraid of guns, but like, what should I do, Dave, short of locking myself in my house and not going outside?
I think one of the things is pepper spray.
Right.
We in schools, I trained an entire school district in Alabama, and they're giving every teacher pepper spray, and we tell them Saber Red pepper gel. Go to Amazon.com, get a can. You got teachers you love. The first 2 people to die at Sandy Hook were a female principal, a female administrator who charged the killer. 2 unarmed women who charged the killer to just. If they'd have both had pepper spray in their hand, one of them got a shout off, "Owie, mommy." You know, a principal told me one time, he said, you know, I will die for my kids. Give me something other than my keys in my hand. Legally, I can't carry a gun. Start with pepper spray and get some cans of inert and do a couple of shots with it outside. Make sure you're upwind. Take a couple of shots.
Right.
You wouldn't carry a pistol around you never fire. Don't carry pepper spray around.
Right.
Seek martial arts. Seek training and keep yourself physically fit, and avoid confrontations. Dress, you know, avoid places where bad things are going to happen. Live the safe lifestyle. These are all basic fundamentals we can give to anybody we love.
Yeah.
You know, there's 2 fundamentals up front that I'd like to give people, and that is this terrible expectation that the bad thing is going to destroy you psychologically. And the truth is just the opposite. Let's talk about our veterans. It used to be you had to dig for this data. Now it's right up front. Just go online, Google what percentage of our veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan get PTSD. The 2 best U.S. studies, the British study, the Dutch study, The Veterans Administration all say 5%. 16% of all the veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD. 11% of the ones who didn't go to Iraq and Afghanistan have PTSD. The British study of their guys, about 5% of the veterans of Afghanistan, British have PTSD. The Dutch study, their troops in Afghanistan, 5%. I keep running into veterans who think there's something wrong with them because there's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
There's the smear of our veterans, that the veterans are all homicidal, suicidal, out of control wackos, when the truth is just the opposite. You may have heard that 22 veterans a day take their life. The best we can tell, that's accurate data. You got to extrapolate a lot of data. But what they don't tell you is only 1 or 2 are from the current war. Of course there's other veterans. Of course there's other wars. There's hundreds of thousands of Gulf War veterans, millions of Vietnam veterans. And the word veteran is applied to anybody who retires or gets out of the military who maybe didn't even serve. The Veterans Administration, the VFW and the American Legion says 2 million people are fraudulently claiming to be Vietnam vets. Are we counting them? So
Right.
see, 22 veterans taking their life. You get this image of they coming home as shattered human beings. They're all taking their life. What they don't tell you is only a tiny fraction of that. One's too many, but only a tiny fraction of that are from the current war. And suicide's up across our whole society. And that's the other thing I would give to anybody I love. Number one is get this expectation you're going to come other end stronger. What doesn't kill me only makes me stronger. It's the name of a book on what does not kill me, a wonderful book on post-traumatic growth. The Bible said it over and over again. Nietzsche flat stole that from the Bible. Romans chapter 5, we glory in tribulation. For tribulation work of patience, patience experience, hope, hope maketh not ashamed. Romans chapter 5, 2000 years before Nietzsche, saying the same thing. A new greatest generation is coming home. That bad experience is going to make you a stronger human being. And you need to believe that. Even those who have a problem, even those 5 or 16% who have PTSD, we're darn good at treating it. We get better every day. Marcus Luttrell, lone survivor, he has a podcast. I was on his podcast. I got his permission to talk to him, talk about him. I trained his unit before and after the lone survivor incident. I talk about post-traumatic stress disorder is like being obese. Post-traumatic stress is overweight. There's a big difference.
Huh, nice. I like that.
Marcus Luttrell came back from that incident. His doc told me he was 500 pounds PTSD, totally debilitated. A year later, he was 50 pounds PTSD. He wanted to get back up on the horse. He wanted to deploy again with his unit. He did. It was a good thing. Today, he tells us, it took a couple of years.
Right.
He tells us he is 100% post-traumatic stress-free and stronger from the experience. So step one, going to that life and death event, believe it'll make you stronger. If there's a problem emotionally, get help and have faith the help can help. But the next step in the equation, and Tony, this is just this civilization-wide epidemic of sleep deprivation. The number one factor in our suicides is sleep. The number one factor in traffic accidents is sleep. The number one factor in drug overdoses is sleep. What we tell people, if you have teenage kids, here's parenting 101 for the 21st century. Have teenage grandkids. When you send your kid to bed at night, take their cell phone away from them. No laptop in the room, no cell phone in the room. They have got to go to the room and sleep. Here's what we know. 18 hours without sleep, you have impaired judgment equal to 0.08 legally drunk. 24 hours without sleep, impaired judgment equal to 0.10 legally drunk. 2 or 3 days without sleep, you're psychotic. Any graduate of Army Ranger School will tell you about hallucinations on the third day without sleep. We always knew that impaired judgment, alcohol, was a key factor in suicide. Alcohol creates impaired judgment. You make a bad decision, never get a chance to rethink it's suicide. But the most pervasive form of impaired judgment is sleep deprivation. A cop told me one time, he said, I had a good girl. He said she was an A student. She said, Dad, it's embarrassing. You don't have to take my cell phone every night. You can trust me. So I trusted her. He said, and she took her life. Wow. He said, I never knew the hell my little girl was living in until we looked at the text messages on her cell phone. Night after night of ceaseless, relentless, vicious bullying. And she's up all night long trying to protect herself, trying to fight back, trying to find somebody who will stand up for her. He said, my little girl was sleep deprived and bullied to death. And the one thing on earth that I could have done for her was take her cell phone every night, send her to bed, let her turn off all the bad stuff in this world. He said, I can't ignore that text message in the middle of the night. How do I expect my kids to? We have an epidemic of sleep deprivation. Video games, social media, put you in an alpha state. You become incapable of keeping track of time. Sleep is a biological blind spot. Our bodies are pretty good getting air, food, water. Our bodies are truly incompetent at making us get sleep because it always happened naturally. It got dark. There was nothing else to do. And then we had the light bulb, the video game, and social media, and suddenly we've got an epidemic of sleep deprivation running through our entire civilization. Now, the three greatest killers of our kids, sleep deprivation and impaired judgment, are the critical factor. We know truck drivers require by law to get enough sleep. Sleep is a critical component in traffic accidents. It's a critical component in drug overdoses, and it's a key component in suicide. The top three killers of our kids, they're all up to levels we never dreamed of. Suicide, drug overdoses, and traffic fatalities are all up across our civilization. And the new factor in the equation is this epidemic of sleep deprivation. The mind cannot function if the body is not healthy. And the baseline, I got a degree in counseling en route to teach at West Point. The first thing is, have you had a good night's sleep? Have you had a good warm meal? When's the last meal you had? The body's got to be okay before you even begin to work on anything else. And if you staggered into work drunk, if you're a cop, you're a firefighter, you came to work drunk, we kick your ass.
Right.
If you go up to work sleep deprived because you played video games all night long, you need your ass kicked. It's equivalent to showing up to work drunk, and it's a social blind spot. If you were staggered in the house drunk 3 o'clock every night, you have a problem.
Right.
You spend a whole lifetime having people know that that's a problem. You stagger into work sleep deprived because you played video games till 2, 3 every night. You have a problem. It's a social blind spot. Nobody told you that there's something wrong with this. There's something very wrong with it, Tony. It's an epidemic.
This information is in many ways more potent than everything you talked about in the beginning of the show about violence. The chances of somebody, like, statistically just being killed today are real slim. But all of us, including myself right now, are sleep deprived, and it's kind of stopped me in my tracks right now, because I'm going, wow, like, those numbers are kind of scary, and they are. You can see it's, and it's cumulative. You can't make it up. You've got to, it's not like, oh, I'll just take a nap this afternoon and be good. It's a fascinating thing.
I teach this to all my cops. You want a few nuggets, sleep nuggets?
Yeah.
Just a couple nuggets you can take right now and run with. Number one, and I'm a huge science geek. My favorite website, sciencedaily.com. I check it every day through every category. Number one, we are designed to sleep in the dark. I mean, dark, dark, dark.
Right.
A study in the sleep lab, truly dark room, bathroom light is on, the door is shut. The light coming under the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin that you need. And train yourself to sleep in a dark room or a sleep mask. The sleep mask, we're in our military now. We know sleep is a combat multiplier. We know sleep is a major problem in our military, and we're passing out these sleep masks to everybody. And when you go to sleep, have a truly dark room or put that sleep mask on.
Right.
It's something you can do right now that will rock your world and get you quality sleep. The other thing, the snooze alarm. Never touch the snooze alarm again. There's the minimum nap, not an effective nap, and not the best nap, but the minimum nap is 30 minutes. Anything less than 30 minutes is a waste of time. Now, 30 minutes is not a good nap, it's a minimum nap.
Okay.
But a 10-minute nap is like an adrenaline rush. You just get that startle response.
Right.
And the snooze alarm is creating that startle response. You hit the snooze alarm, hit it again. You just threw away 30 minutes of your day. And think about this now, as the warrior, right? You're fighting for your life. You've been stabbed, you've been cut, you've been beaten. You reach deep inside to find that one last blow, that one last spurt of energy. Have you trained mind over body, or did you wake up every morning and hit the snooze alarm and let your body drive your brain? Are you triumphant over your body? Have you woke up every morning and rolled out of bed like you should? Or did you hit that snooze alarm? The first act of every day was one of giving up? Was the first act of every day one of failure when you hit the snooze alarm? And the body tries to adapt the 10-minute snoozes. Then you're teaching your body that, and the body can't do it. The body will turn itself into knots trying to adapt to 10-minute snoozes. I'm serious. Never touch a snooze alarm.
No, the psychology of this is profound. I remember reading Ali's autobiography, and he said he hated running so much that he figured out to put his running shoes on top of his alarm clock. So when the alarm went off, his body wanted to go hit the snooze alarm, but his hand touched the running shoe.
Yeah, beautiful.
Isn't that nice?
Ali,
yeah, Muhammad, the greatest. Yeah. So that is huge. This is huge for people. Okay, other tips. Science Daily, Sleep Mask Black.
Yeah, caffeine management. The half-life of caffeine in our body is 5 hours. The caffeine you took at 5 p.m. is still at half strength when you go to bed at 10 p.m. Caffeine doesn't make us not sleep. Caffeine makes it easier to stay awake and harder to have quality sleep. Caffeine makes us, I can sleep. I can sleep with caffeine. Caffeine makes us have bad quality sleep. Guard your sleep, protect your sleep. Save caffeine when you need it. Now, coffee is good for us. The state-of-the-art research, coffee drinkers across the board are living several years longer than non-coffee drinkers. The data, it's just amazing research. Tea's good for us. Sodas are sugary poison. A soda a day is not going to kill you if that's your only source of hydration. And if you're pounded down sodas before you go to bed, you're getting bad quality sleep. What we tell people, the diet sodas, again, 1 or 2 a day is not going to kill you. It's the only source of hydration. And the energy drinks. For 15 years of war in the U.S. military, we passed out energy drinks like water. The companies gave it to the military for free. The military passed it to the troops. Now, last year, after 16 years of war, 2 major Department of Defense studies in energy drinks. And there's a complete ban on energy drinks in our military now across the board. They're all bad. All they do is give you a mega dose of caffeine. They're good for a 1-hour burst of energy before an athletic event. If you want to go and spend money on cigarettes, nobody's going to stop you. If you want to spend money on energy drinks, we're not going to stop you. The military is not your mommy. But energy drinks are right up there with cigarettes and the kind of thing that we will not ever again hand out to our troops. The coffee, why would we put that stuff on our body when coffee and tea are so good for us? And what we see is 2 normal cups of coffee at breakfast, 2 cups at lunch, switch to decaf and have all you want. And then when you need it, it'll be there for you. We are in a society of absolute horrendous caffeine abuse. And here's the test. Take the test. Cut off all caffeine for 1 day. If you get any withdrawal symptoms, you know damn well that's what's happening. Those are withdrawal symptoms. Headaches, shakes, irritability, digestive problems. If you get withdrawal symptoms from cutting off caffeine, that's living proof you're abusing the drug. When you need it, it won't be there for you. And so the next nugget in the equation is caffeine management across the board. And then nicotine's of no value as far as sleep deprivation goes. Caffeine truly is our friend. We use it responsibly. Don't touch this snooze alarm. A truly dark room. These are just little things we do right now that can rock your world and improve your sleep hygiene right from the beginning. Your naps, 30 minutes the minimum effective nap. An hour and a half is far better. It gives you 1 full nap cycle. But your nap should never get in the way of your night's sleep. If you have time to get a decent night's sleep, then suck it up. And other than maybe a little 30-minute nap right after lunch, there's some research that tells us that siesta after lunch can be pretty good for you. No more than 30 minutes. No more than 30 minutes. But your nap should not get in the way of a good night's sleep. At the end of it, in about 6, 7, 8 hours into good night's sleep, some magic things are happening, some dreaming, some deep cycle processes that we can't replicate. So there are things a good night's sleep will do that a nap will never do. And don't let your nap get in the way of your sleep. Exercise some warrior discipline. Stay awake during the day. Cut off caffeine, after lunch, and then use your sleep effectively. Guard your sleep. Protect your sleep. And I tell people that anybody who texts you in the middle of the night without a damn good reason is not your friend. and they need to be blocked. You know, who's going to be your mommy? Who's going to stop you from listening to that text message in the middle of the night? You know, control your sleep, guard your sleep, and pace yourself for the long game. We need four-quarter players. We need seasoned players. With law enforcement agencies, rotating shifts are insane. And the 12-hour shifts for our law enforcement agencies, California Highway Patrol just came off at 12-hour shifts. It was a disaster. At the end of a 12-hour shift, people are exhausted. They want to be like firefighters. Cops want to be like firefighters. Work 12-hour shifts, go all that time off. Well, firefighters get to sleep on the job. Only firefighters and prostitutes make money in bed. So,
I'm not going to look at
the fire guys. We love you. We love you. We're just teasing. But these are the dynamics, Tony, just nuts and bolts right now that can rock your world as far as sleep goes.
Beautiful. I love it. I feel like I just had a counseling session. So everybody listening to the show is like, you just got one of the most experienced, passionate, mindset and just, I mean, Dave, you've been influencing the communities for 2 decades now. I remember being mesmerized the first time I saw you talk when you, I don't even think you had your books out, because I think, yeah, you did. Yeah. You were just, and you're working on your material and I saw you in small venues and I saw you at the big venues and just honored and excited.
True, Tony. I felt the same way the first time I saw you do the spear. It's like, boom, a big light bulb comes off. This is magic. This is what we're wired to do. Same thing. Right back at you, brother.
I appreciate that. And it's funny how still, I first started working with the law enforcement community in 1993 in Dallas at the ASLET conference. And of course, ASLET's, no longer around, but it was, I just mentioned that because somebody might Google ASLET trying to figure out what it is, yeah. but still, here we are like all these years later and it's a weird thing because I remember Bob Willis, one of the original authors with Gary Klugowitz, who wrote the Street Survival for Caliber Press. He watched me teaching. It was 95 in Alabama, actually, at one of the conferences there. And he said, you teach the 2 seconds before the fight that we all teach. And he was talking about the airbag moment. He was talking about you're inside the reactionary gap and you can't, the good guy, the good Samaritan, the first responder can't match the adrenaline dump of somebody who's planning an ambush. It's just chronologically, psychologically impossible. When you're saying, hey, turn around, you got any weapons, you're asking questions, it could be for our non first responders listening to this, it could be somebody going, hey, you got directions. And while your brain is catching up that you're about to get set up and you're about to get jumped, you're always going to be late. The fastest thing is, and this was my epiphany, was doing the sucker punch drill in 1988, where I was trying to like really like under a magnifying glass dissect movement. It was back in the VHS days. We were videotaping, and I had one of my students standing in front of me who was a really good boxer. All I had was a mouth guard, and he had on 16-ounce gloves. And I said, hey, Warren, start a conversation with me. But your role is you're whoever you are, and I got to figure out who you are. So adopt a character, start a conversation, and then sucker punch me at some point. And I really thought in the beginning, my ego, he was my student, was, okay, I'm going to do wax on, wax off. I'll slip, I'll bob and weave, I'll bong sao, tan sao, I'll do all this martial arts stuff. And the first shot turned me into a Pez dispenser. For those of you who don't know what a Pez dispenser is, right? Just boom, hit me under the jaw. And what I realized is, and the premise of this was, hey, when we practice martial arts, and you've heard me talk about the 3 Ds, detect, diffuse, defend, D1, D2, D3. Most people practice and start all their training from D3. Okay, here's a gun disarm. That's D3. How do you get out of a headlock? Here's D3. Okay, defense against the tackle. Here's D3. Okay, and I go, like, if you want to get off the X and you want to develop pre-contact cues, you need to do the same amount of training for D1 where you're developing situational awareness. And I was talking about how your self-awareness, your unconscious bias influences what you're actually situationally aware of. That can cloud. Those are the glasses you wear. And then defusing and de-escalating. And then here's the thing is, there's 2 types of confrontations. Like when we're doing our gunfighting course, I I talk about the difference between a shootout and a gunfight. The bad guy starts a gunfight, you start a shootout. In the timeline, it's just a cartoony metaphor to help people recognize that your cognitive brain still has to threat discriminate and catch up to what's happening in a sudden ambush. And that's the refractory time between stimulus and response. And what we need, and the big hook for me, and it took me a couple of decades to be able to verbalize and vocalize this, was this airbag metaphor. That when I'm talking to somebody, whether I've got my hands down around my kit or I'm an unarmed citizen and something happens and those hands come up to push away the danger, if my cognitive brain went, oh good, your airbag deployed, now create some space and get out of this accident. So it's this car accident metaphor. And here's an amazing story. I was teaching in Atlanta, and I get a text message, yes, in the middle of the night from one of the attendees, but my phone was on silent, that says, I may not be there. We had a bad storm on the way down. Sky opened up, and I hit, the rain came down like this torrential downpour that the windshield wipers did nothing. I skidded off the road, hit a tree. I'm okay, but the car is totaled. It's a rental. It was basically the short message saying I might not make it to the seminar. So I start the seminar, and it's just somebody just checking in, giving me, hey, like an attendance report. I start the seminar, and at one point in the seminar, like I'm doing right here on our podcast, I'm explaining this airbag metaphor, and I'm saying, imagine you're driving along, and all of a sudden you realize that somebody's blown a light and they're going to hit you. And imagine if you had to deploy your airbag, you had to push a button like on your radio. You needed to go to a fine and complex motor skill to hit a button. Would anybody be able to do that while you were like going, holy shit, hands on the steering wheel or hands up? It'd be impossible, right? Some genius figured out how to create some sort of sensor system in the car that when the car got hit at a certain impact, it deployed this for you. And because it was bypassing this cognitive complex motor skill requirement. While I'm explaining that and I'm demoing, Dave, I'm going, and so that someone hits the car, the airbag deploys. I hear a gasp in the audience from a female who turns out to be the woman who texted me. And I go, are you okay? And she goes, and she's like looking at her arm. She says, oh my God, look at this. And she's got like a carpet burn on her forearm. And she says, I'm the one that texted you. Go, look at my arm. This is when the airbag deployed. It caused this chafing on my arm. And I said, in other words, the startle flinch beat the speed of the airbag, right? And she's like, yeah. I said, did you happen to like record that during the accident? Because that'd be so good. Like if we could,
if only I had that on video.
Right. I said, and so everyone laughed, and I said, so in your next car accident, try to film the startle flinch beating the airbag for. But it's but what made me think about that is you saying like the first time you saw Spear, you went, oh my God, like Spear is I liken it to like you like Mountain Hardwear. I like Arc'teryx. This person likes North Face. Our style is the brand, how we like to move. This person likes to grapple. This person likes to kick. This person, but there's one thing that unites all of us, and that's physiology. Yeah. And what makes all of those cool jackets, that technical wear, waterproof, is a product that's built by either like 3M, right? Like that makes Gore-Tex. Yeah. And so the Spear system is like the connective tissue, the fascia. It's the Gore-Tex inside. And if you say, I am a human weapon system, and I need to understand physiology, physics, and psychology, I am safer. I weather the ambush. I weaponize the flinch. And now Spear becomes a bridge to whatever style you would practice all these years. And that's been my message for years. Yeah. It's still, I'm still ranting about it because some people look at it as this versus that, as opposed to integration.
But Tony, and of course, what I did then was take that aftermath dynamic and forewarn people in the incident. Tunnel vision is almost universal. You got to be warned. The bad guys got tunnel vision too.
Right.
Rapid lateral movement, just a sidestep, take it off the bad guy's radar screen. Slow motion time. I have had hundreds of people tell me they see the bullet and I believe them. Yep. Auditory exclusion. The shots get quiet. Memory distortions. A cop, somebody came to murder the cop's family. And the cop's wife told me, she gave him a load of double up buck in the face. Game over. Had a mama bear protecting her cubs. Very dangerous thing. Right. I tell people we carry a pistol around because the rifle's pain in the butt and hard to conceal. When you're home, you get to choose. You get to choose which weapon. You're a bird hunter. Carry a trusty bird gun. So she's a bird hunter. Game over. But she said, she said it messed me up. She said, I heard the audio of my 911 call. To this day, I have no memory of making that call. Those memory gaps freak people out.
Right.
That almost half of all trained seasoned cops had memory gaps they were conscious of. About 1 out of 5 remembered something that did not happen. If you're sitting here right now, boom, tunnel vision, auditory occlusion, slow motion time, memory gaps, distortions, you would meet every definition of a psychotic episode.
Right.
But if you warned these things might happen, no big deal. But the last piece of the equation, we expect crazy things in the heat of battle. When a week later, a gunshot goes off and you're shaking, you say, where'd that come from? Arkansas state trooper, gunfight, bad guy's down, he's alive. A week after the gunfight, he and his wife sitting in the bleachers watching their daughter at a swim meet. We'll push his button. Starter's gun goes off. When he didn't expect it. Boom! Heart's pounding, gasping with fear, or gasping, drenched with sweat. His wife thought he's having a heart attack. I call it the puppy coming for us. We got a human brain on top of the dog brain. And when you were a kid, you touch a hot stove. The dog blew a hole through the screen door, grabbed you by the throat, peed in your lap, said, don't ever touch that stove again. It's called one-file learning. But how much more so was a neural pathway established from a gunfight? A week later, a random gunshot goes, so I didn't expect it. Here's the puppy saying, gunfight, gunfight. Nobody warned that this might happen. Nobody taught him what to do. It is not PTSD. It's normal.
Right.
It can turn into PTSD depending on how you deal with it. You got to make peace with the memory. You got to separate the memory from the emotions. But when we forewarn people that this is going to happen, then it's no big deal. And you use your breathing and you separate the memory from the emotions, you get on with life. People got warned about these aftermath dynamics. It's what we get most often, Tony, is a cop's in a life and death event. A week later, a month later, a year later goes to qualify. First time he pulls that trigger, that puppy's going crazy. He thinks he's broken.
Right.
We need to know he's not broken. He just needs to work through this.
This is, you know, and, you know, my talk with Brian Murphy, and I told him, I said, man, you're mentoring future generations, as are you, getting people to think about this stuff. And this comes back to full circle at the beginning of the show, you know, talking about just acceptance, right? In our golden rules, we talk about, hey, you know, acceptance, don't stop thinking, keep moving. And I'm talking about the mindset behind that, not just the physicality of it. And, you made me just remember I was talking at the ITOA years ago, Illinois Tactical Officers, and Chief Chudwin invited me down, and after my talk to several hundred SWAT cops, one guy, I'm cleaning up my equipment, and there's one guy like hanging out in the shadows by the door, and he was like kind of spooking me out. He was afraid to come up and talk, and I remember like actually. When he started to come up towards the stage, it was so weird that I actually moved behind my equipment and everything because I didn't know what was going to happen. I wanted to create a little obstacle. I'd indexed my blade. I was like, what's this? Like, and he comes out of the shadows and I could see he's emotionally charged. And he says, during your talk, you said something about a stimulus being introduced too quickly. Could you repeat that? And I said, well, what was the context? And he says, I was point on a SWAT team, and 5 years ago, we were making entry on a house, and we saw that this guy, he was asleep in his bedroom in the back. We could, you know, through the window, we could see that, but the way to come in the house was another door along the side. And somehow we had telegraphed our approach, because when we opened the door, which was unlocked, we didn't have to breach. He was standing in the hallway with a shotgun raised, already up. And so, you know, three of us had come in the door, and as I'm opening the door and I look up, there he is standing there with a shotgun, and everything went into tachypsyche, that super slow motion. He said, I jumped out of the way. Number 2 got shot. Number 3 killed him. And he said, I've been having nightmares for 5 years. I've been thinking I'm a coward, that I jumped out of the way. And you said something, and this guy's like holding back. You can see his eyes are watering. And I looked at him. The first thing I said, Dave, was, I said, brother, you are not a coward. There's no way. I said, there's very few cowards in the world. I said, no one makes point on a SWAT team being a coward. So stop saying that to yourself, number 1. Number 2, what happened there is this, right? Your situational awareness was compromised because of memory systems, anticipation, thinking ahead. Okay, he's here in the bedroom, he's that. And now the refractory gap between stimulus and response has to catch up to this new information. And it's something I tell all cops, that when it's this presumed compliance, what I wrote about in my article, presumed compliance. If I say don't move your hands, and you move your hands, you're not ready to move. You're ready, because what your brain, when you say do not move your hands or put your hands up, you're actually visualizing what that suspect or what the bad guy is supposed to do. If he changes that up, almost every dashboard video or surveillance video of somebody doing that, the cop repeats himself 2 times, 3 times, 10 times. Don't move, don't move, don't move, which is evidence, psychological evidence, that cop wasn't ready to actually do something when he issued the warning or the command. Anyways, I look at this guy and I go, listen, your survival system is your real backup. And that's a reframe for the community, that your intuition and your instincts have better survival radars than your cognitive brain, which might deceive you or distract you. Your survival system, so you thought number 2 was your backup, but your intuition, your instincts was your backup. That's what started the flinch. Had you stayed there and held your ground, you'd have been shot in your face, and the outcome probably wouldn't have been so good. Number 2 was shot in the vest. I looked at him. I said, did the guy live? He goes, yeah, he was shot in the vest. I said, so what we have here is bad guys 0, good guys 1, yes, right? And I said, but it was physiology that saved you. And this is part of what I loved when I first heard you talk, and part of it is, and you've got like so much research, but the stuff that, because of my bias, was everything you talked about with regard to resiliency and mindset, and how that ties beautifully into this whole,
Can I give you one last thing for the audience?
Yeah, please.
I'm weaving in with that survival mechanism. One last thing, just a nugget to give your awesome audience out there. And I have heard this so many times that I'm convinced we're wired this way. A sudden violent death, the sudden violent death of a family member, the sudden violent death of a fellow law enforcement officer. And your very first response is, oh, that could have been me. Afterwards, you look back at yourself. I wish it was me. I would have laid my life down for that person. And my very first thought was a selfish one about myself. I've heard this so many times. I think we're wired this way for good reason. You're in an aircraft with a small child. The oxygen mask comes down. What do you do before you put the child mask on? What do you do?
Yeah, put yours on.
Put your mask on first. It's a fundamental law of survival. Before you can help anybody else survive, what do you have to do first? Survive yourself.
Correct.
And the most powerful survival tool the world has ever seen is the human brain. And we're wired for survival. And the sudden violent death, the puppy says, whoa, that could have been us. Pay attention. And our very first response is a selfish one, because it's wired that way. Like, put your mask on first. That we got to explain that to people, because it tears them up. It bothers them, Tony. So we can take all this stuff. We can give the people out there in the front lines, mentor this next generation, have them forewarned and forearmed.
I love it. It's on a show I was interviewed a few years ago, the host of the show said to me, he wrote an amazing article called "Violence is Golden," and it's very provocative. But he was listening to me talk about this "be your own bodyguard" human weapon system philosophy that everyone's a VIP. This comes back to your talk. Everyone's a VIP. Some of us just can't afford to have our own protection detail. But the reality of it is, and I've worked with some very successful executives who have their own details, and I explained to them in our initial conversation, I go, listen, if somebody really wants you, they're going through them. So what are you going to do? Like, at the end of the day, you need to be your own bodyguard, and that's the metaphor. Oh. And it's just interesting. You're again spot on with all of that. And I'm just, again, we haven't talked in years, so it's a reminder that you just, you connect, and there's that friendship there, and it doesn't matter that a decade's gone by or 5 years gone by.
Anytime.
It just resonates. Any What's the best way to people, to get to your events? Tell them about your website where to catch you.
My website, Killology.com, KILLOLOGY.com. We're doing Saturday House of Worship security team training, long before 9 people murdered in Charleston, long before 26 people murdered in Dallas. Or in Texas. We've been saying we got an issue out there on that it's sheepdogseminars.com. Our hardware is sheepdogknifeandgun.com. The Emerson sheepdog knife, the enhanced slide pulls, trigger finger index point, sheepdogknifeandgun.com. Newest book, Assassination Generation, and finally, the baseline. You get the kids' book, Sheepdogs. And if anybody in the family carries a gun, go with the second book too. It's a kid's book. You blow through it in a couple of minutes. You touch lives. Why mommy carries a gun. And meanwhile, understand that the spear system is the most powerful and anatomically wired system out there. And check up on my friend Tony Blauer and whatever you do, work that spear in there first. Everything else comes after that.
Brother, I love you. Thank you for that. It's been so good to catch up. I look forward to seeing you on the road, and we'll have you back on the show again in the future.
Put me on, Coach.
Thank you, buddy. Be safe.
You too, brother. That's a good place to wrap it up, Tony.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'm going to, I'll call you. Well, actually stand by one sec.
Okay.